Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I am just letting people in from the waiting room, and we'll just give it like 30 more seconds before I really jump in. I've heard from a lot of people who can't attend tonight, but who are wanting to record it. So you'll probably see a notification on your screen saying this is being recorded. You can keep yourself on mute, and your video can be on, off, whatever you're comfortable with. Feel free to ask questions in the chat along the way. And Jen is in here. She'll say hey in the chat. She'll give me a shout out if your question is urgent or like pertaining to exactly what we're talking about in that moment. But I'll also leave time at the end for questions too. So glad you're here, and so glad to jump into this stuff with you. So we're going to be talking about getting what you need to succeed tonight. And you might be an early college student hoping to get accommodations at your community college. You might be a Web Academy student who is headed to college next year and wants to know about how to transfer some of your accommodations when you get there. So whatever you're here for, hopefully we will talk about what you're wanting to know. My name is Allison Steife. If we haven't met, I am a college and career counselor for early college students in Baker. Prior to this position, though, I worked as an academic coach for community college students. And a big part of my job was helping them get accommodations at their college. So I've been through this process a lot. I know it can be intimidating. And if you want to connect one-on-one, I have my contact info here. So we can do some even one-on-one coaching through the process. But tonight, I'm just going to give an overview of it all. So it'll be hopefully short and sweet, with potentially a lot of questions still left on your mind pertaining to your particular situation. So all of this will be recorded and we can connect after this meeting or after this webinar as well. So tonight is just all about kind of this idea of knowing yourself, knowing what you need, and knowing how to get it. So you're responsible for the knowing yourself and knowing what you need part, but I am here to help you with that knowing how to get it when it comes to succeeding in a college classroom. When you have a learning difference, a disability, something that you feel like impacts your ability to access education in the traditional classroom setting. So we're going to talk about accommodations. What are they? Who qualifies for them? How do you qualify for them? What does the process look like to get them? And then, like I said, we'll have time for questions at the end. So you can either hold on to them or you can throw them in the chat and we'll either chat about it in the moment or at the end. So what are accommodations? If you're here tonight, then you probably have an idea, but I just want to make sure as we talk about it, we're all on the same page. So accommodations are, here's just like a nice, pretty definition before we dive into the mess of it all. So accommodations are legally mandated modifications, adjustments, auxiliary aids, and or services that give a student with a disability an equal opportunity to benefit from the educational process. So hopefully that sounds familiar, like the idea of that sounds like what you have now on your IEP or 504. Or if you don't have an IEP or 504 yet, maybe this sounds like something you would really like to take advantage of. What accommodations look like in high school and what they look like in college can be very different. So I do want to make sure that this is one of the first things we talk about, because if I go back to this slide, that word legally mandated, high schools are legally mandated to do very different things when it comes to accommodations than colleges. And so it can look very different, both getting them, using them, the whole thing. So,
Allison, you might
yes.
be covering this in a second, but somebody just asked, does Baker send the 504 to PCC, for example?
We will talk about it, but no, they do not. So we'll get to what that process looks like. That's a great question. So I'm not going to read this whole thing. I just want it to be up on the screen, and you can refer back to it. But basically, there are some laws that apply to both, some pieces of legislation that apply to both the high school and college setting, some that only apply to high school. But the ones that apply to both, like Section 504 and Title II, the way they apply is different. And the big reason, if I were to just sum it up simply, is that high school is legally required, right? Like all young adults are legally required to go once a year. Well, really through all K-12, right? Not just high school is required, but school is required unless you have some sort of legal exemption. So because it's required legally by the government has to provide those high school students with what's called a FAPE, free appropriate public education. And that's where accommodations can come in for students with disabilities. College, not legally required. And so because of that, they're not legally required in the same way to provide accommodations. So it doesn't mean that you can't get accommodations at all. It just means the process of getting them looks different. The kinds of accommodations look different. So let's talk about some of those differences really quick. So in high school, just terminology wise, you're going to hear it called an IEP or a 504 plan. Those are the two types of documents, types of plans that can be created for you in high school. They're usually created by either the special ed department or the school counselor, or even a team. If it's an IEP, it's usually a team of people putting that together for you, with you, hopefully, but definitely for you. They're the ones kind of running the show, are the grown-ups. In college, there's no such thing as an IEP or a 504. It's called a letter of accommodations usually. There might be slight variations of that terminology, but that's generally what it's called. And it is created by who is usually referred to as the disabilities coordinator. Sometimes, again, that word will be different. So sometimes they might be called special services coordinator or an accommodation specialist. They can have varying names, but generally they're going to work for the Disability Services Office, and they will usually be called something like a disabilities coordinator. So that's just a terminology difference to know. In high school, your accommodations are usually coordinated and implemented by the school. The school is the one responsible for helping you. If you don't have a diagnosis yet for that disability, get one through evaluations and then put together that plan for you and seek you out and make sure you're getting the help you need. All these adults are coordinating with each other for your sake. So the SPED team, the teachers, the counselors, everyone's working together to make sure you have what you need. In college, all those things are coordinated and implemented by you. With the help of the disabilities coordinator, they're the one who's going to help you put in writing what you need and make it official. But you're the one who is going to initiate it, go through the process, and we'll talk about that all. So that's one of the biggest differences is it's on you. In high school, teachers are going to approach you. If you are failing in class, they're going to say, hey, I'm concerned. What do you need? Let's talk to the SPED team, your counselor, whoever. And if you need some accommodations, let's get you some. In college, you can be failing a class and your instructor will very likely say nothing. And they'll expect you to be the one to approach them if you are needing some sort of special assistance in their classroom. So teachers are going to take less initiative, and parents, I'm going to encourage you to try to take less initiative. Otherwise, you'll feel very frustrated. In high school, parents play a very large role in this process. They're usually in the room as those meetings are happening to create those IEP and 504 plans, and they're talking with your teachers if they're concerned, and they're one of the adults on your team, right? In college, the parent does not have access to student records in the same way, to meetings in the same way. In fact, they need the student's written consent, even if that student is a minor, which I know a lot of you are probably not 18 yet, and yet you have this power where you need to be the one to sign what's called an ROI, a release of information that the college will have for you. That basically gives your parent permission to be in that meeting with the disabilities coordinator with you and speak to them without you present. Email, questions or concerns or whatever. So parents, this is where you take a big step back. And I know it's so hard and so painful, but where you might have reached out to your students' teachers in the past with concerns, I'm going to encourage you not to reach out to your students' instructors at the community college. You'll likely just get shut down and they'll say, I can't talk to you about this, but also that's just not their role. And as college instructors. And so there are a few ways you can still be involved in the process and support your student. It's just going to look different. Last big difference in high school, the teachers, based on that IEP or 504, they might modify your course curriculum. They might change the pace of your assignments, the type of your assignments. They might shorten your assignments. They might give you a longer due date to complete assignments. They might even change. Some students on IEPs might have tests that look a little different. Instead of an essay test, you get a multiple choice test. In college, those things don't happen. So in college, they're not required to, at least, do those things for you. So it very rarely happens. So they will provide you with accommodations usually, but not modifications. That's kind of like a semantics game, but they won't change what you're learning and how you learn it, but they will provide you with some extra support usually. So some of that support, some of those accommodations in college, we'll talk about a few examples here. So a lot of students get access to audiobooks for free. So rather than having to sit and read your textbook, you can listen to it either while you read along or while you do something else. So if audiobooks are helpful to you, those are things you can get. Extra time. So you will not get usually extra time on things like essays and homework, but you can get extra time on in-class work. So if your teacher says, before you leave class today, complete this worksheet, this lab, this whatever, and hand it to me on your way out the door. It's your ticket out the door. You can often get extra time so you can take that home with you and turn it in the next class period instead. For notes, you can get access to either a fellow student's notes or sometimes even the instructor's notes themselves. You can get extra time for tests. That is another thing you can get extra time on. You will usually take those if it's a test or a quiz, really any sort of an assessment. You go to your campus's testing center usually, and you can get some extra time, take it in a quiet place, not have to worry about the stress of everybody else is finished and I'm still working. So That's an excellent one. That's one I see get used a lot. The classroom accommodations themselves might look like alternative seating or different, a different desk, a different place for you to sit, the ability to leave the classroom as needed and not be penalized for participation points, stuff like that. Lectures can be recorded. Either the teacher will record it or you can record it. So these are some examples of the things that you might see on your letter of accommodation once you get it. So who qualifies for accommodations, and kind of how, what does that look like? So I'll pause for a second though and just make sure, Jen, were there any other questions that popped up about accommodations themselves?
No, there was nothing that popped up. I just, I think this is amazing, and I want people to be thinking in their minds as you're talking about what their needs are. And hopefully by the end of this, they can ask some specific questions, and that they're getting everything they need to learn how to advocate for themselves, because it's so different, like you said. So yeah, nothing yet that I need you to jump in on.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. It can feel a little disappointing and overwhelming to hear these things like, wait, no, the accommodations I have in high school have been so helpful. And am I going to get what I need in college? And I hear you. It can be a lot to take in. And the cool part is that a lot of you are taking college classes now and getting an understanding of what kinds of things are extra challenging and you might need extra help with. And you still have your high school support team to help you do that, whether that's your advising counselor. I'm here to help you with that. The SPED team is here to help you with that. So you still have a whole big team to help you figure out how to make college work in the best way possible for you. So who qualifies for accommodations? There's two main things that a college needs and wants to see. So one, you need to be diagnosed with a disability. And I'll pause for a second because I want to recognize for some of you that word disability is tough. And you might have taken on a different kind of language to describe your challenges. So some people like to say that they have a learning challenge or a medical difference or there's different ways, a lot of different ways people might prefer to describe their challenges, their disabilities, their struggles. In the college setting, it's important to refer to it as a disability. And there's not really any way around that. So I just want to encourage you to get comfortable as possible with that terminology and the ability to say, I have a disability. So having that disability is the first thing. We'll talk about what some of those disabilities might look like. The second thing you need is a thorough and professional documentation of that disability, in particular, hopefully its impacts on your life and learning, or the accommodations you've received or are suggested to receive because of that disability. So if we were to throw them into like 4 main categories, here's kind of how I see them. So there's physical disabilities. This is usually the kind that you can see, right? So these kinds of disabilities impact your mobility, your vision, your hearing. You might be partially blind or fully deaf, or have a challenge with physically getting to and from places. So there's lots of accommodations for those types of disabilities. Health-related disabilities. So these are the ones that might impact your physical health. It might be short-term, it might be long-term. So I've worked with students who have epilepsy, and that requires accommodations, absolutely. even something like IBS. I've worked with students to get accommodations because that interferes with their ability to stay in the classroom sometimes, or even attend class sometimes. So that can be, the health related ones can be widely varying. A learning disability. So the two I most often see is either a specific learning disorder, or something like dyslexia, or ADHD. So these are absolutely the kinds of diagnoses that the college can help you with getting accommodations for. And then we'll call them psychiatric or psychological disabilities. These, again, might be short-term or long-term, but they impact your mental health. And your mental health absolutely impacts your ability to learn. So if you have general anxiety disorder, if you have PTSD, something that's really going to impact your ability to access your college education, then that might be something that you can get accommodations for. I will say this is the harder of the categories to get accommodations for, because there tends to be an expectation that you can manage both. And if you can't, then take some time away from college potentially, and come back. So that's unfortunately something that can be a little trickier, but not out of the question for sure. I've seen a lot of accommodations for general anxiety disorder in particular. So you need that diagnosis, you need that disability, and then you need documentation. The documentation can be a little harder to get. Usually in high school. So what's tricky about this is in high school, the high school will create the documentation for you. They'll be the ones to evaluate you and write it all down and create the IEP or 504 and whatnot. The college doesn't create any of that for you, but they want to see it all. So if you have an IEP or 504 plan, that's excellent. That's a great piece of documentation to have. But you need more usually than just an IEP or 504. You need some sort of either evaluation or record that's going to show from a medical professional, an educational specialist, somebody. Usually, if you have one of those people inside your school who has done that for you and created either that evaluation or some sort of record for you, that will suffice. So sometimes those things are created within the school setting and you can use those at the college. Sometimes those are done outside of the school setting. But basically some sort of diagnostic testing and a psychological interview, something that not only mentions your diagnosis, but also the severity of it, how they came to that diagnosis, the significance of its impact on your life and your learning. So that is like the golden ticket. If you have that, that is really what the college wants to see. They will also accept other things, other kinds of records, like let's say, especially for those health related ones, those physical health related disabilities. So let's say you have a traumatic brain injury, you got a concussion, and you have a TBI. You're probably going to have some medical records to show that. So that might not be like an interview that you've done or an evaluation that you've had. It might just be a simple doctor's record. So these are the types of documentation you want and need. If you have them somewhere now, hold on to them, make copies, scan them into your computer, have them saved somewhere, because you're going to want to reference them throughout your college experience as you work to get accommodations. So how the heck do you get them? If you click on this link, we have on our website kind of a short and sweet step-by-step guide to what this looks like, kind of if there's three main categories that you can then further break down into what that looks like. So I have the link to this on the slides, and that's available to you. But let me go back to our presentation and just simplify it even further for the sake of keeping tonight short and sweet. So the steps to getting accommodations. First things first, I strongly want to recommend that you meet with your Baker advisor or your counselor and even potentially the SPED team. Remember, I said you already have this great group of adults on your team. And I would love for you to review the documentation that you have now, potentially update it as well, so that you are very aware of your documentation, what your disabilities are, what your accommodations are, and that's going to give you a great idea of then what you might get at the college. I love attending those meetings. Invite me to, because I can help kind of paint that picture as well throughout the meeting of, okay, here's what the high school accommodation looks like. Here's what you can expect at the college. So that's the first thing I would love for you to do. The second thing would be to schedule a meeting with the Disability Services Office at your college. In a few slides, I'm going to show you, I have a link with resources to each community college's Disability Service Office. So if you're wondering, how do I find them? I have some resources for you. I'll show you in a few minutes. So you'll as you schedule that meeting with the Disability Service Office, that meeting might be called an intake interview or something a little more official, but it's just your initial meeting with them. Some of them will have an application. In fact, a lot of you will have an application to fill out as you schedule that meeting or in order to schedule that meeting. And along with that application, you'll submit your documentation that we talked about, and then you will prepare for and attend that meeting. So I think preparing for that meeting looks a lot like thinking through your answers to certain questions that we know they're going to ask. And on the website that I showed you, there's a resource for those kinds of questions to expect to be asked. I also have that in the guides for each college that I referenced that I'll show you. So, but really sitting down and thinking through, because you're the one, remember now, like you're the one whose answers matter far less than your parents. They can sit in the room with you for that meeting, potentially if you sign your ROI and let them know that your parent will be attending. But it's going to be on you. You're the one who gets to answer those questions like, how has your disability impacted your access to learning? How have accommodations helped you? What about that accommodation was helpful? Tell me more. They do a lot. They want to know a lot about what kind of accommodations you've had, what kind of accommodations you expect. So that's something I'm happy to do with you, is help you prepare for that. But really kind of grounding yourself in your academic needs, like Jen was talking about, getting really reflective and walking into that meeting, feeling confident that you know what you need and you know how to ask for it. Because that meeting is going to produce a document called, if you remember, your letter of accommodation. So after you have that meeting and you get this letter of accommodation, now you can use your accommodations. So that also looks a little different to whoever asked, does Baker send my 504 over? Nope. So you're the one who's going to submit your 504, have that meeting. And then once you have that letter of accommodation, it's your responsibility to then send that letter of accommodation or share it during office hours or whatever that looks like for you with your instructors. So your instructors will not know that you have accommodations unless you tell them. Very different, right? So yeah, if you have extra time on tests and you know in your math class that you are going to need extra time on your tests, you can send your letter of accommodation to your instructor with an email saying, here's my letter of accommodation. I would like to use the accommodation of using extended time on tests. Please let me know how you would like that to look in your classroom, because it will vary from teacher to teacher. So some teachers will say, great, I will just send all of your tests to the testing center. Every college has a testing center where you can then coordinate with the testing center to show up when it's time to take that test, when you would normally take it in class usually, and schedule your time to take it, and it'll be waiting for you there. Other professors will say, okay, 24 hours before each test, you need to remind me to send it to the testing center. So some of the professors will put it back on you again and say, it sounds good. I'm happy to do that. Let me know 24 hours before the test to send it in. So it depends on the teacher and how they like to interact with students' accommodations. So you're going to see a lot of variation in what that looks like. And then throughout the term, you're going to self-advocate as needed. Self-advocacy is something students with accommodations in college get very good at, because there's a lot of letting people know what you need, because people don't ask you anymore or assume and just give you what you need. So if halfway through the term you realize, shoot, I'm having a hard time keeping up with the in-class content, I need help with notes, with note taking. Okay, tune into yourself, recognize that need, and then approach the professor. Hey, I would love access to either another student's notes or your notes. Here's my accommodation for that. My letter of accommodation says I get that. So it's a lot of checking in with yourself, recognizing your own gaps and where you're struggling, and self-advocating as needed. And then at the end of each term, you have to renew your letter of accommodation. So each school has a slightly different way of doing this. A lot of schools will send you an email at the end of the term saying, if you would like to renew your letter of accommodation, just email us back and let us know. And then they send you one it has all the same things, just a new timestamp, basically, that says these accommodations apply for the following term. So make sure you renew them. It's a great time too at the end of the term to check in and say, did I get what I needed? Do I feel like there's an accommodation that I should have that I don't have, and I should go back and meet with the disabilities coordinator and see if we can add it in some way? So that's a great time for reflection too, not to just be like, sure, sounds good, send me my new letter, but really check in with yourself and say, am I getting what I need, before you just.
Hey, Allison, quick question.
Yes.
For virtual only students, I have somebody asking about, do you still go to a testing site? How have you seen this work in just a pure virtual setting?
Yeah, so your teacher can change the timer on those virtual tests. So let's say, the standard time that the class gets is 2 hours to take the bio test. If you have an accommodation for extra time, usually that is no longer than time and a half. So if you have 2 hours to take the test traditionally, then you would have 3 hours instead. And they can just extend that timer for you. So yeah, the nice part about a lot of the accommodations is if you're at home right now, you are kind of automatically getting some of them. Like, a lot of the teachers are automatically recording the lectures and sending them out so you can go back and rewatch them, right? So some of the accommodations are kind of automatically happening. You're already taking a test in a quiet setting, hopefully at home. Like, you don't need to go to a testing center for that. So So that's what I've actually seen a lot more of is there's a lot of built-in accommodations when you are taking classes at home. Great question though. Okay, here is the slide with the guides for each school. So there's only a couple missing on here, the tinier schools, just because their disability services offices are a little more intimate. They're not as systematized. So they don't have an online application to fill out or a process listed on their website. They just kind of expect you to swing by the disability service office. Usually, especially at the smaller schools, it's not even a whole big office. It's just one person's office. They expect you to just go chat with the disabilities coordinator. So if you want help with that, if you're at a smaller school like Oregon Coast, then oopsies, then let's connect and I can let you know what to do. It'll be a little simpler process. But yeah, you can, I will share all these slides and you can click on them on your school. And this is what they'll look like. They'll have the contact information for your disability service office, the website, where the office is located. And there will be information here, a lot of what we've talked about. So you'll be savvy with a lot of it. But here's the section that's really going to apply to you. How do I request accommodations at my college? So here's COCC. I'll have a link to the application for that school. If it's on here, usually it requires you to sign in first because it's done through your portal. There will be, you go to their website to usually up at the top to schedule appointments if you need to do that. So it'll list kind of your step-by-step at your school, what it looks like. And then this is the questionnaire that I was talking about, the kind of example questions that you can be expected to answer in that meeting. So that's on here as well. I'm not sure if it's going to load for me right now. It'll probably pop up on my screen in a minute. And then again, some just reminders about how to access your accommodations once you have them. So feel free to use those. Guides for your school, or connect with me directly if you just kind of want a coaching experience to walk you through the process. I love doing that with students. So either or and. So that's at your community colleges. Let's chat a little about moving forward. So some of you might be wondering, okay, but what about my university? My next school, my 4-year. A lot of 4-year schools are actually starting to offer something called academic coaching, which this can be really helpful for students with disabilities who are used to having a lot of support in the high school setting. And now are transitioning to a lot more independence. You get this person, usually it's an upperclassman, so somebody a little older than you, who's been a successful college student. It might be a grad school student too. And you just get to meet regularly with them, and they will walk you through how to get the support you need, what kind of services to access, what kind of tutoring is available to you. They'll just help you really stay organized, stay on top of things. And you can usually get like 10 sessions a term. So this is a great resource. So go look at the schools you're interested in and type in their search bar academic coaching and see if it's something that they offer, because that can be very, very, very helpful. I get asked a lot, like, if I'm a student with a learning difference, what are schools that I should look at? There are so many that are doing a better and better job at this, but these are just a few that I'll throw on your radar for now. Jen, who's in the chat, is our other college career advisor. She or I would love to help you find the right school for you. I'm just throwing these out there so that you're aware that there are schools that support students exceptionally well who have disabilities, especially learning disabilities. These schools are especially attuned to learning disabilities, I will say. So University of Arizona is known for what's called their SALT Center. UC Irvine is one of the UC schools that has a reputation for really valuing neurodiversity and offering a lot of support through their Disability Services Center. And then these East Coast schools, Northeastern and American University, actually have really unique programs where, so Northeastern has a learning disabilities program. At American, they call it their learning services program, but it's for first-year students with disabilities, usually learning disabilities like ADHD or something specific. But you actually are part of a program. You have to pay for it, but can be sponsored as well. And you get like you either get to meet with a specialist once a week, sometimes twice a week, I think, with American, or you get a mentor student. You get to take classes with students who also have learning disabilities. And so the classes formatted a little bit differently, especially those core classes. So you're getting the support you need. They just have it tailored in a way that really is designed to set you up for success in that first year at a university. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that there are things that are starting to exist now that are colleges are starting to recognize that they can do more for students with disabilities. So there are a lot of, every college is going to have a disability services center, and the process is going to look very, 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 very similar at your university as it is your community college as far as getting and using accommodations. So know that. And then also know that there are some schools that are just going to do an exceptional job if you're really looking for specialized services. So that's my pitch, my spiel, to basically recognize that it's out there and then meet with either Jen or I to find a school that's really going to be a great fit for you. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to drink my water, and I'm going to chat.
Thank you. Say thank you.
And you all let me know. Yeah, this is a great time. Either unmute yourself or throw your questions into the chat, but let me know what's on your mind.
Okay. Thank you very much for doing this presentation.
Yes, happy to. It's something I'm passionate about. Is there anything that I talked about that you want to know more about? Something I didn't talk about that you're like, how could she not bring that up? Anything at all?
Will the slides go to my Baker email?
The slides will be on the blog. I will, so I guess I have the link in the slides, which is not very helpful, right? So I can definitely email that link out. And I can also put it in the chat right now so that you all can kind of tuck that away. So let me pull up, our blog and copy paste its link into our chat. And that way, there you go. So that's where the recording will be. The slides will be in there, hopefully by tomorrow afternoon. Absolutely by Friday at the very, very latest. Anything else?
I will just say, like, 2 quick examples why I think you should just always ask, even if you think, okay, this is crazy, this is the self-advocacy, I had one of our Baker students a couple of years ago who, because of some head injuries, was triggered by certain lights. And her, she was an early college student, so she was at COCC, and she advocated for herself. And there was one particular classroom that had lights that bothered her, and the college actually changed out every light just for her. So you just don't know. So, always ask, always advocate for yourself, and you might be surprised, even if it seems like, oh, they would never do this for me. And she did have some medical documentation, which Allison has already talked about. And the other example I was going to give was one of my own kids who had some traumatic brain injury related to repeated concussions. She did not have a 504 in high school because this like all happened her senior year, towards the end of her water polo season, where she just kept getting knocked in the head. So all she had going to college was, some short medical documentation. But once she got to college, she built on that and was able to, she's a junior now, get full accommodations every year, just with building upon keeping her medical records and continuing to go to the doctor and getting recognized. Like, yeah, I have light sensitivity, sound sensitivity, I need special settings, and blah, blah, blah. So don't worry if you don't have a long history right now of documentation, and you don't even have a 504, or you don't have an IEP. You can still start to build that. Just start from where you're at. So.
Yes, that's a great point. I had a parent actually email me a question in that same vein prior to tonight, asking about how recent does the documentation need to be? And there's definitely a point to which your documentation is considered out of date. Each school gets to decide what that is for them. I will say 4 years is kind of the safe bet. If your evaluation documentation was within the last 4 years, they will usually accept that. I've seen them accept things as old as 10 years, but that's when it's been very thoroughly documented. Like the evaluation was from 10 years ago, but then they've had their IEP or 504 updated every year. And so there's, like Jen's talking about, kind of like that trail, that paper trail that shows that that diagnosis is still impacting you. So one of the best things to do is just reach out to your college directly and say, how recent does my documentation need to be? And I've had students who, they go back to the doctor and get an updated note, so that there's that more recent timestamp on it. So so much of accommodations in college, the answer to the question is so often it depends, because it does depend on the college and what they want and need and are willing to do. So I can help you to a certain extent, but it's always great to reach out to the college as well. So